I just want to say welcome to the Pure Heart Church podcast. My name is Zach Good. I have the awesome opportunity to be the producer in this podcast, and we've got a great episode for you today. So let's jump right in. I'm here with my friend John Spooner. He is a junior high pastor here at Pure Heart Church. Let's go. And today we're going to be talking about some things that Gen Alpha is going through right now. I think a lot of people are talking about Gen Z, and maybe talk about millennials, but we don't really hear about what's going on with Gen Alpha students, what they're struggling with theology-wise, and maybe just culture-wise, kind of what they're going through. So it's going to be a great conversation. Let's jump right in. John, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing good.
Let's go.
Really good.
Let's go. Yeah, I mean, the conversation about Gen Alpha is so important. We at Pure Heart, I like to think that we put our money where our mouth is, right? So just about a year ago, my lead pastor Ryan and I were having a conversation about what would it look like to better pastor the junior high group. And so I think a lot of the junior high group gets kind of, brushed under the rug almost a little bit. Like, hey, you guys, you were kids, and then we'll come back when you're in high school. And then you can actually start dealing with it. But I think, as you probably know from being a middle schooler at one point or another, that time, 6th to 8th grade, is just so pivotal. Okay. Just the stuff that they're going through is just insane. And maybe for the people watching, you've been like, I don't know, I was Googling Gen Alpha, and it's like, why is Gen Alpha? And then like Google autofill is like, says, why is Gen Alpha so annoying? Why is Gen Alpha stupid? Why can't Gen Alpha read? Like all these different things. And I'm like, no, dude, Gen Alpha is like incredible. And so there's a lot of, I think, just like we saw it with Gen Z, and just like we're seeing with Gen Z is super cause driven. We see Gen Z that they care so much about their world and about seeing people and come to some sort of aspect of truth or whatever. Yeah. And we're seeing that with Gen Alpha too. Like they're so cause driven. However, they mask it in such interesting ways. Yeah. So I want to do a test with you, Zach. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
Uh-oh. So as most people probably know, Gen Alpha has some crazy language. Yeah. Just the way that they talk, the way that they communicate with each other. It's prompting people to Google, why is Gen Alpha so stupid? So, I want to test you. I've got some, it's called brain rot. Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah. It's called Gen Alpha brain rot. So I would love to just test you a little bit. Okay. With some Gen Alpha brain rot. What does, phantom tax mean?
Oh, I actually don't know this one. I've heard kids use it, but I don't know it.
So phantom tax, and it's funny because I think a parent wrote the definition, so I'm just going to read the definition. Refers to the act of taking a bite of someone else's food. And if you're like, hey, you're talking about that pea protein drink, hey, let me get some, hey, you owe me some phantom tax on that. So, which I will never take phantom tax on that drink because it's awful.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay, you ready for this?
Okay.
Ohio.
Okay, isn't that kind of like isn't that like the new like mid? Kind of. Ohio means like bad. Okay. So like bad. If you say like, or it's like weird or cringy. Like if you say Ohio, which it sucks because that's where I'm from. So I'm just like, I'm sitting here and these kids are calling me Ohio. I'm like, yeah, I'm from Ohio. What are you talking about, man? And so Ohio. Okay, last one. I'm trying to think of what's the worst one. This is probably my least favorite one. And it's what the sigma. What the sigma. I mean, I know what sigma used to be, but I have a feeling it's not the same because it's kind of, the big, strong, buff, like workout bros. Yeah. But is it the same thing?
I think that's still good. Yeah. So the concept of what the sigma, which again is my least favorite Gen Alpha brain rot
and it's
ever.
It's like right? Like
it's
ERHM.
It's ERM.
ERM.
I can't even say it without cringing. So what the sigma is kind of like what the heck.
Okay.
A way to express shock. But yeah. So those are some ways that Gen Alpha likes to communicate with each other, and I don't understand it either. So just live through it. I don't know.
I think that brings us to like
a good point, which is I see all the time in media, people like to compare Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and they like say they're kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're both Gen Z.
Yep.
And I think that there are some similarities for sure. Kind of like I'm sure many people can see similarities between like Gen Z and millennials.
Yep.
But I think that a lot of people are not realizing that they are a completely different generation with a completely different set of values.
Yeah.
I think that really like delving into maybe some of the things that are different and how we approach it. And if we could just go into some of the key differences.
Yeah, I would say one of the key differences that you're seeing with between Gen Alpha and Gen Z was just on the edge of technology. So Gen Z starts in 1997, I believe, is the first year of kids being born. And so I was born in 2000. And so for me, I grew up with very limited access to the internet. And so I grew up with I didn't know, I could get to the internet, but really in reality, I just wanted to play Disney Channel games online.
Yeah.
And, or I just wanted to play on my GameCube or, my Game Boy or whatever it was. And so we saw that there was a technological, the advancement of technology from Gen Z to Gen Alpha. You think about the kids that are 4, 5, 6 years old right now. Those kids who are maybe just now learning how to interact with the world are also expected. I heard from a parent the other day of a kindergartner that they're expected to have tablet experience going into kindergarten.
Oh my gosh.
And so you're getting to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, technology is kind of, as it did with Gen Z, is kind of defining what they do. And I have a few stats about kind of technology and what's going on and why we maybe see an issue with Gen Alpha struggling in the way that they do. But some of the stats are 43% of Gen Alphas have a tablet before the age of 6.
Wow.
43%. So that's almost coin flip, heads or tails, Gen Alpha has a tablet. 58% of Gen Alphas have a smartphone by the age of 10.
Of 10.
Wow. So that's fourth, fifth grade.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. This one was crazier. 65% of those between ages 8 and 10 already spend up to 4 hours a day just on social media. Not talking about they're watching Netflix, not talking about, they're, playing games on their phone. We're talking straight up social media, which I argue is one of the reasons why we see such a problem with identity in Gen Alpha, because we have a bunch of Gen Alpha students that are being told who they are 4 hours a day. And I think as a congregation, as Pure Heart, as maybe parents that are watching, or maybe people that are, around kids, I think one of the biggest things that we can do is continue to pour into Gen Alpha who they actually are. Because when you give these, what I love about Gen Alpha is there's a lot of innocence with Gen Alpha right now. And there's a lot of innocence because, as soon as you hit puberty, you go from thinking in black and white, this is right, this is wrong, to actually being able to have critical thinking, being able to actually begin to kind of understand that there's more than just black and white. There's a gray area too. And the problem that we're seeing is that we're giving a lot of students access to things that requires a lot of that hard critical thinking that they don't have the ability to do yet. And so we're allowing them to see the darkest parts of the world in social media. I mean, if you think that social media is not a dark place, I beg you to spend more time on it. Because social media is a dark place that wants to tell you who you are, what you should do. And the societal pressure there is just insane. And so when we see that Gen Alpha is spending more time on social media, up to 4 hours a day, which 65% of them between the ages of 8 and 10, I mean, they don't have the cognitive ability to understand what is right and what is wrong, because they'll just hear it and they'll just expect it to be truth, which is just crazy.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think I've seen, you have a lot of generations that maybe as much as they trust the news, I see a lot of Gen Alpha just trusting what they see on TikTok,
100%.
what they see on Instagram, because that's their news. That's their TV.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a disservice for us to not look at the Bible too and say, man, there will be a time where I think Paul writes to Timothy that says there will be a time where people will not want to hear sound doctrine. They will just want where people will feed them what their itching ears want to hear. And I mean, just seeing the amount of, honestly, let's just call it as it is, false teachers. So if you give kids the ability to be on social media, they're having to have a level of discernment that, maybe God can give them, but let's just be honest, like a lot of Gen Alpha is not praying for God to give them discernment about the things that they're watching.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so what are we doing to protect the innocence of Gen Alpha while also understanding that we need to give them information and we need to give them we need to feed them the word of God so that they can walk into different scenarios and understand that there's a war going on between what they should be believing in the Bible and what the world is trying to feed them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see it, you hear a lot of terms about it, but there is definitely it's like a battle for the mind of our Gen Alpha kids, where they intake so much knowledge. I mean, I even know, personally, I've got friends who have struggled with social media addictions, you got into college or whatever.
Yep.
And your downtime, you start by just looking at Instagram every once in a while, check what your friends are doing. But then they came out with all these reels. And so then it's you start checking
the reels was bad.
You start checking what your friends are doing. And then suddenly you're 45 minutes, hour and a half. And I started realizing, I'm like, how much information is my brain consuming? Yeah. And I don't even think our brain's meant to consume that much information in that little time. Yeah. And so part of it is how do we not add to the noise, but how do we give Gen Alpha something that's going to be life-giving?
Yeah.
Because there's so much noise they're hearing. And I think Pastor Dan kind of mentioned this in one of our last podcast episodes. He's like, I have a newfound compassion for the younger generations because they're hearing so much noise and they're just trying to discern it all.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the ways that maybe you've seen that we can not just add to the noise, but is actually an effective way to say show Gen Alpha, hey, you're loved. Hey, there's a God that loves you. Hey, this is what God has for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us as a ministry and for me as a pastor over junior high, what we've been realizing is that we don't want to just be anti everything that's going on in the world. Because let's just be honest, if our mission was to just get rid of phones and to just get rid of tablets and do all that stuff, we would be very unsuccessful. However, if we can meet Gen Alpha where they already are, this is why for Heart Youth, we have such an online presence. This is not because we want to, build up our own name and all this stuff, all glory to God, but there is, I mean, we're talking about if we pulled up some of the stats of the people that are watching the content that we put out online in the form of short form videos. So let's talk about Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, stuff like that for a second. If we know that students are already going there and we know that social media is such a dark place, why would we not, just like the Bible says, be a light in a dark place, be a salt to a tasteless world. And so for us, we've just really felt the conviction that, hey, if Gen Alpha is going there, if Gen Z is going there, we need to be there too. And so giving them content that is talking about the real things of life. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we do is just assume that they're too young to understand it. And so I'm talking about, man, black and white, there's a level of cognitive ability that younger children do not have. However, they're already being fed the information. And so we talked recently about the LGBTQ plus community, and I had asked our junior high leaders, hey, is this being talked about in the schools? And we're talking about kids that are 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. These 6th graders, they're tiny. They're I don't there's some puberty hits them like a truck, because when they're in 6th grade, they look like they should be in 3rd. But these kids are learning about their world through the eyes of an agenda. Let's just talk about it. There's an agenda that the world has to try and conform our students to be a specific way. And so if we're not building them up in the faith, We think about Proverbs, train a child up in the way they should go so that when they grow older, they will not depart from it. I mean, we're seeing a lot of students that are not being trained up because their parents do not want to have the conversation with them, because the conversation, let's just be honest, having conversation with Gen Alpha is sometimes awkward, is sometimes weird when they start saying skibbity Ohio toilet riz or whatever. And, all these different things. It's like, it's hard to converse with younger students and stuff like that. But at the same time, how pivotal a moment for us as a congregation and maybe as parents of Gen Alpha to actually like engage in those conversations.
Yeah, I think that you really hit on a good key thing that I've even noticed, because I help out with some different junior high ministries, and something I've noticed, they take in a lot of info.
Yeah,
but just being someone to sit there and listen to them, like to just sit and talk with them and listen to them. I think that's a big deal.
100%.
And honestly, we got to make sure that, we're not affirming things that, affirming false beliefs or, affirming things that we don't want to have in their worldview.
Yeah.
But being able to have someone that they can just talk to.
Yeah.
I mean, they just brighten up.
100%.
I've seen that so much. And so that's really cool. You're saying just like, we need to be intentional about having conversations with them and just talking to them about life, talking to them about things they're interested in, things in the world. What are they watching? A lot of these kids, they don't know what their identity is, and they don't know where it comes from. And so I think we were kind of talking about this earlier, but you were kind of telling me about some of the things that you're seeing in kids and their struggle with identity. And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that they're spending too much time on social media when they shouldn't be. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not anti-social media, but I am very anti not giving people and students specifically ways to just figure out about the world instead of being taught. The problem with social media is that social media is just feeding them whatever it wants to based on their algorithm or whatever. And you're seeing that, Gen Alpha and even Gen Z is getting in trouble. Like, I think we see a lot of because they're so lonely, because they feel like they need to constantly be in communication, they're getting in trouble with finding people to talk to online that they shouldn't be talking to, or predators, honestly, talking to them on social media, stuff like that. And so I'm not anti-social media at all, but I think as much as they're scrolling Instagram, as much as they're scrolling TikTok, we need to be speaking into their life. Yeah. And so one of the ways that what I think that's the biggest thing is there's just too much social media usage. Reels are so addictive. Why? Because they're made to be addictive. They're made to just overload your brain, and it's like, hey, I just want to chill for a second. It's constantly feeding you stuff, and then you start to realize, where did I get this belief from? You know what I mean? Oh, I heard this on Reels once, and it was about this, and now this is what I believe because somebody put a Bible down on the table and then started talking about the Bible, and it's like, dang, we have a lot of people that are trying to tell our young people who they are and what they are. I think there's also a pressure to conform to society. And I mean, we see this in Romans 12. It's like, do not conform to the patterns of this world. Yep. I mean, Jesus has been talking about it, and we need, as a church and as people that are looking after the next generation, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is that these students 1 in 4 students are trying to belong somewhere, which I believe is the biggest reason why we are seeing a rise in LGBTQ plus youth, is because they are trying to belong to a community, and because they don't feel like they belong to any community, or because they feel like their hearts are dictating who they are just saying, well, you know what, I'm just gonna go be a part of that community. I guess I'm this now because I feel this specific way. So it's so important that we have conversations with them about that. But I think one of the biggest reasons why Gen Alpha struggles with their identity is because they have parents that struggle with their identity.
Yeah.
When you have a parent that does not know who they are in Christ, that is unfortunately something that can be passed down to children. And so I think about my own life. I think about my parents who are incredible, did the best they can raising me, and they always provided for me. They were always at every game, and I so appreciate them and love them for that. However, one of the things that was passed down to me was the fact that they were very, very defensive. They were very defensive in how they talked. They were very defensive in how they argued and all these different things. And so for me, that's not just a behavior that is just displayed. It's picked up and it's taught. Whether or not it's something that you want to be taught, it is. And so I think a big issue that we have is that there are a lot of parents that maybe are not secure in their own identity. And so then they see then their students see them chasing, trying to find out who their identity is in, what their identity is in. Let's talk about workaholics for a second. I mean, you see a bunch of people that are providing for their family. Let's talk about dads for a second. Providing for their family, doing what they need to do, grinding so that they can make ends meet. And that is so, so important. However, your job can never be your main identity.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen when you get fired, when you get laid off, when there's, a recession and people's jobs are getting cut? What's going to happen when your identity is in the things of this world or in temporary circumstances? Like, then as soon as those temporary things are taken away, like, you don't know who you are anymore. And so, I mean, building our identity on Jesus is like building a house on a rock that will always stand. The storms may come, the winds may blow, but our identity is built firm instead of these shifting ideas of culture. So I would argue that a lot of it has to do more with parents than it actually does Gen Alpha. And so I think if a parent's listening, it's like, hey, are you displaying to your child that your identity is secure in Jesus?
Gen Alpha really is an amazing generation. If the conversations that I get to have with them, I'm like, wow. I mean, these kids are learning a ton about the world.
Yeah.
They're learning so many things so quickly. Mm-hmm. And so for us to be able to help shepherd them and foster the relationship with God and help them move into the next season of their life, I think is so important. And it's so admirable for what you guys do, for what our parents are doing. And so just want to encourage everyone in that and say, continue shepherding your kids.
100%.
Continue pouring into them, having those conversations. Yeah. I think it's so important, and these kids really do appreciate it, even if it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
I know in the conversations that we have with them, I mean, they appreciate getting talked to and being heard.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that I want to encourage parents, I wrote down just a few things that we've seen at Heart Youth that we would love to partner with your kids in, but also we can only partner as much as you allow us to. And so what some of the things that we want, I would love to encourage parents right now to do. I have three things. First thing is this: pray for your children and pray with your children. Man, prayer has the power to change any circumstance. And so I think for the parent that's loves to be in control, there is a level of control that you must relinquish to God and humble ourselves in front of God in order that we can pray that our circumstances might change. So many of us have knee-jerk reactions because we love to have control over our situations, when in reality, when we relinquish our control to Jesus and we start to pray and we believe that God has the power to change our circumstances, I think we'll see a little bit different. So I would say pray for your children, pray with your children. Another thing that parents, you can do is establish daily disciplines with your children and make sure that the disciplines are not only theirs, but they're yours too. And so for a parent maybe a parent that's listening to this, you are, again, your kids look at you just to see what you're doing. I love what Pastor Dan says with Olivia, when Olivia walks up to him and says, "What you doing? What you doing?" Just wondering, what are you doing? And in those circumstances where our kids are looking at us, what are we doing? Are we saying something that we are not? Are we telling them to do something that we are not practicing ourselves? I think one of the biggest reasons that people do not want to be a part of the church, and this is, I've seen this numerous times, the reason that people don't want to be a part of the church is because of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is one of the biggest reasons why people do not want to follow Jesus. And so practicing what you preach, making sure that if you're like asking your student, hey, you should be spending time in the Word today. Hey, you should be going to church today. Let's just talk about it. I think when we make church an option for kids when they're young, or when they see us making church optional, they're going to see Jesus is unnecessary, because they're going to see, man, I don't need Jesus. Like, my parents don't really, they used to go to church and, all this stuff, but they, kind of fell out because they had that one thing with that one crew member, and then they just stopped going to church altogether. And I think that leads us to our final thing is apologize when necessary. I think we see that there are a lot of parents that are unwilling to admit that they were wrong. I think one of the most disheartening things that we can see at a church level is when people do not own up to the stuff that they do. Yeah. I think one of the most frustrating things for me, I want to talk about the restaurant industry for a second. One of the most frustrating things that I've seen in the past 6 months, it's been so weird, is when, let's say, like a waiter or a waitress is like forgets the food or something or whatever. They say, oh man, sorry, those people over there, they messed up. Sorry, that guy forgot to get your drink. Sorry, that I literally had a waiter tell me, sorry, your other waiter was stupid and forgot what your order was. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on? And I think, on a serious note, we see that there are a lot of people that are unwilling to own up to the things that are, whether it is their fault or whether it's only partially their fault or whatever. I think one of the most powerful things that a parent can do is apologize to their kid. Absolutely. And say, hey, I'm sorry. I wasn't right. This is a reason why this is the reason I did this, not an excuse, because excuse, permits the action to happen again. But this is the reason why I acted in this manner. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? And in that, I think in apologizing to our kids, we're giving them the power to the power to forgive the trauma that's going to happen in their lives. We see that there's, more talk about what trauma is and all these big T trauma, little T trauma, stuff like that. And so often we want to shield our kids from trauma, which I believe is 100%. That's a great thing to do. Like, shield your kids from trauma, but at the same time, also give them the tools of like, hey, when this thing happens, when this person hurts me, when the church hurts me, when pastor maybe says something that's not correct, and we have to talk to him and say, hey, you know what? Like, that wasn't right. And like give them the ability to apologize. Yeah. Because when we apologize and when we forgive, it's giving power back to us. It's not giving power to the person that hurt us. And so apologize when necessary, pray for your children, pray with your children, and then build up spiritual disciplines in your household that you're also doing with your kids and without your kids being there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Thank you so much for talking to me, John. Okay. This has been a good talk, and I hope that whether you're a parent out there or maybe you're someone that just wants to know more about Gen Alpha or just tuning in, I hope that today this kind of helped you understand kind of some of the things that are going on with our Gen Alpha kids and how the culture is affecting them. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, make sure that you tune in next week. We've got another awesome episode coming up. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, follow our podcast. We've got a lot of awesome episodes coming up where we're just talking about what's going on in our culture, what's going on here at our church, and just things about how to follow Christ better. It's going to be a great time. So thank you so much for tuning in with us, guys.